Rick was a computer programmer who had just saved enough for his first house in the suburbs. He had bought an older house because of its size and charm. It had a second story with an attic and was very well built. The other owners had left in a hurry and didn't mind losing money on the sale. Rick, who was also great at fixing things, saw this as a huge opportunity. If he could fix it up nicely and didn't want to stay there long term, he could flip the house easily and make some great money on it. There was no real reason given to him that the house had changed hands so many times every few months. Rick had moved into the house and everything had settled. He even packed away those boxes that always get left till last and never sorted out. He had learned from this past mistakes. He had settled in for the first night in the new house and was getting ready for bed. Rick did some research on the house that evening while lying in bed on his phone. He read that some people believed that the house was haunted. Just then he heard a creaking sound above him coming from the attic. It was an old house, and the stories were getting him all worked up. He placed his phone on charge and turned off the light. Suddenly, he was awoken by a sound, banging in the pipes in the walls. It was most likely the pipes contracting or expanding because of the temperature differences, he thought. I must insulate them and get them properly secured so they don't make this horrible noise. He drifted back off to sleep. After awaking the next morning, he headed downstairs and found that some items were out of place. He must have been so tired not remembering where he had placed things or placing them incorrectly. Moving was always so stressful, he thought to himself. He got ready and set off for work. It would be a long day indeed, as he didn't feel very rested. Rick headed off back home and was admiring the house from the outside. He approached the front door and unlocked it. The door swung open in an oddly inviting way. He set down his keys and sat on the couch to relax a bit. He was going to install some home automation later when he had some free cash, and this would be saving him some effort opening and closing blinds or turning on lights, etc. Crash. A sound from upstairs and some running footsteps. He got up instantly and went to go investigate what the noise was. He got upstairs and discovered his toothbrush cup in the bathroom had fallen, and there was no one to be seen. He had heard footsteps, so someone must be around. He investigated a little further and found that there was no one there and there were no windows or anything open. He was now very suspicious. He placed the toothbrush and cup back on the sink and calmly went downstairs. Rick was a little shaken due to the noise, and it sounded like someone was running. Maybe those horrible haunting stories were true, he thought. Later on that night, he heard the pipes banging again, and this time a small scratching noise in the ceiling. He was so tired he decided to ignore it. There was a noise downstairs. Something else had fallen. It woke Rick suddenly. It sounded like a book, or something had fallen to the floor in the living room. He went downstairs reluctantly and looked around. A book was lying on the floor. He leant over to pick it up and heard a weird groaning noise coming from the second floor. Then a horrible scratching noise followed it. These occurrences would continue the next few days, becoming louder, and the items knocked over or doors slammed were even louder with more anger behind them. Laying on the bed, he heard audible breathing coming from above him like something was watching him through the ceiling. He was a little scared by this, and it made him feel very uneasy. He ignored it and went off to bed. There are no such things as ghosts, he thought to himself as he drifted off. Like the past day, Rick got ready for work and left the house. He drove down the block and parked his car. Got out and walked back towards his house. He saw a gaunt old man with long gray hair sitting in his living room on the couch. "Got you," he said in a whisper to himself. On the weekend, Rick headed out to the DIY home improvement store and the electronics store to pick up some items. He was going to rig the house with all the home automation items he wanted and add some nice features for the guest as well. He got everything he needed and went off home. When he got there, he scanned the house for any trace of someone there. He searched room by room slowly up to the attic. Rick couldn't find any sign of anyone there but looked around for any hiding spaces. It was dusty, but some of the dust was rubbed away by an old hatch to get into the walls. Rick started his DIY project downstairs. He placed cameras on the front and back of the house, installed automatic curtains and lights. It took him most of the day. Now he would watch the old man in his house and wait for an opportunity. Rick headed out as he normally did on Sunday and switched on the remote camera viewing function. The old man was at first nowhere to be seen. Then a little later, a figure appeared outside of the house. He had climbed through the window. He must be getting food or something like that, Rick thought. Rick drove back towards the house and parked in the driveway. He quickly went up to the attic and installed a small speaker. He then climbed into the little hatch into the wall and placed another. He spotted the old man's belongings hanging in the wall. Rick moved some of the items to different places to add some effect. He left the house and went back to his car and headed out for the day. He checked the cameras every now and then to see if the old man was back. He picked up a Ouija board and some black candles at a local horror shop to add to the scare he would give the old man. He got a notification of movement from the camera software and had a peek. Sure enough, it was the old man coming back. Rick headed home and placed his new purchase on the living room coffee table. He then lit the candles up and started talking to the spirit who lived in the home. Rick then picked up his phone and pressed play on the effects he had found online. The scratching noise rang through the house, and he heard a stirring in the walls. He continued, "Come forth, spirit, and show yourself to me," Rick said in a deep voice and pressed another button. A weird, ghostly shriek then played over the speakers, and he heard a gasp. He continued and called out again, this time taunting the spirits to come out of hiding as they were cowards. Then a horrifying, blood-curdling scream filled the air, and Rick blocked his ears. This time it wasn't him, as he hadn't cued the next sound to be played. He heard footsteps and slamming doors upstairs. The old man came tearing down the stairs, screaming, "Stop! Stop! You'll anger the spirits!" Rick looked at the old man and said, "Get out of my house." "You don't understand," said the old man. "I'm keeping the spirits at bay." The doors were slamming, and then Rick spotted the entity coming down the stairs. Objects in the living room started flying round, hitting Rick and the old man. Desperate to escape, the old man ran for the front door of the house while being pelted by items. He got to the door, but it wouldn't open. The entity was getting closer to Rick. He shouted in anger, "Get out of my house!" The spirit laughed as blood started to run down the walls in the living room. Then it spoke back in a deathly tone, "You're in my house." We hope that scared you a little. Remember to subscribe, and check out Creepy Midnight Stories for more.